Hey there, welcome to the North Shore Church Podcast. We are delighted that you've decided to take this step of faith and join us for the next few moments together as we explore one of the messages from our Sunday morning gatherings or special events given to you by one of our pastors or special guests. We trust that you can connect with us through the show notes or through our website, thenorthshore.church. Well, we've been in this series, and we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're not just going to prepare today for tomorrow's promises, but we know that when we step into something new, there might be, before we step into something new, there could be some barriers that would get in our way, some things that we have to go through. And during our 50th anniversary, we had our superintendent, Jason Small, here with us, and he started speaking on Joshua and the Israelites crossing into the Promised Land and crossing the Jordan River. And most of us probably don't remember most of what he said, which is fine. So I thought we could come back and revisit a little bit of this story. I thought it was quite fitting for us to sort of end this series, start and end this series with the story of Joshua. And we know as we've been here the past 2 weeks, prepare today for tomorrow's promises. We're talking about enlarging the tent, strengthening the stakes, making room for what God wants to do. But before we do that, we have to break through a couple things, break through some mentalities, maybe some physical barriers ahead of us. We might have to go through, or like the Israelites had to, before they could even build a bigger tent, they had to get to the Promised Land. But they were ready, they were prepared, but they had to go through a couple trials first. Now, how many here are looking forward to going through a couple trials? Anybody at all? But trials produce perseverance, everybody, and doesn't anybody here want perseverance? Like, if you want to train, you want a little bit of resistance. Anybody with me this morning? No, not at all. Of course, we don't want that, but at the same time, we do want it because we want to be able to grow deeper in our faith. We want to be able to grow a little bit closer to God, and so come our way will be some challenges. We'll have to go through a couple things, cross a couple rivers, and move past some barriers that stand between where we are and where God is calling us to be. And so this morning, we're going to kick off this series heading over to Joshua chapter 3 and then eventually Joshua chapter 4. And so as we do that this morning, I'm going to turn there myself and just going to read a little bit of the story for us right here. And maybe we will start. Well, we could read the whole thing. I'm going to encourage you, read the whole chapter. If you really want to be ambitious, read the whole book of Joshua. But we'll start in verse 14 this morning of chapter 3. But I would say if you want some homework today, go ahead and read. Or if you get tired of listening to me talk, go ahead and read. Or if you're really good at multitasking, go ahead and read and listen at the same time. But Joshua chapter 3, verse 14 says this. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan. While the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all of Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. We're going to keep reading here, verse 4, and we're going to move on. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down to the place where you stay tonight." So Joshua called together the 12 men he appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take a stone up on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you in the future, where your children ask, 'What do those stones mean?' Tell them the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are meant to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the numbers of the tribe of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant stood. And there they are to this day. So here we go. You've got the story. You probably got a couple pictures and images in your mind. And so you can see the barrier that the Israelites faced. They had to cross the Jordan River. Now there's a couple, this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, carried away. But part of the promised land that they had, two of the tribes, their land was actually already on that side of the river. And yet Joshua commanded them that we all must go across the river, which just tells me that we're all in this together. You know, even as a church, some of us are living our fullest potential. We're walking in our purpose. We're walking in the plans that God has laid out for my life, my family, for our church, and we're firing on all cylinders. And some of us are on the journey. Some of us are not quite there yet either. And yet the Lord is calling us to move together, to go ahead and cross the river together, because we are his people, his family that he has chosen for this mission that we have here at North Shore Church. And so wherever you are at in your journey of faith, whether you're just exploring faith, checking out church, whether you've been in and out a little bit, kind of as you're walking into, since we had the image of water, maybe you're, and this is going to throw apart the story. I know they walked on dry land, but maybe you're actually in the water, testing out the waters of church and faith and everything. That's fine. We're not going to leave you behind. Maybe you're waist deep. Maybe you've just plunged right in. Maybe you've just dove right in head first. Either way, we're all on this journey together. And I think about Remembrance Day coming up here on Tuesday, as we're going to remember and commemorate and think about the sacrifices that were made for those who gave their lives for our nation, for the freedoms that we have here in our country. And I think about the statement of leave no man behind. Leave no one behind. And this is really the principle that happens as Israel hears this call from God. The time has come to step into this new season. And as I've commanded you to step into this new season, you're going to have to go through some things. And as you go through those things, I want you to know that I will be with you. I will go before you, I will be with you, and I will stand behind you. And so we have the confidence today that no matter where we're at in our faith journey, the Lord has gone before us. He sees you. He knows the plans and the purposes, the calls that he's placed on your life. Wherever you're at in your faith journey or your journey even here at North Shore Church, I want you to know this morning that God is with you. And he has no desire to leave you behind. And as the pastor here, I have no desire to leave you behind. Wherever you're at, we want to walk with you in your faith. So let's talk about Joshua. What do we know about Joshua? He is a mighty man of God. He is a man that is full of faith. There is nothing that is impossible for God to do in Joshua's eyes. Has anyone ever met somebody like that and you kind of just stood back and rolled your eyes at those people? I kind of feel like I was a bit of a Joshua as a kid. And my friends would just stand back and kind of just stare at me and go, okay, Gary. And so then anyways, I won't share all of my childhood stories. But I can remember as a young person, I think I shared it last week, just dreaming about the most ridiculous things, coming up with the most ridiculous plans that we could be like really effective. Like we're going to have a really good band, and all of these, I'm not going to go through it all because it's slightly embarrassing as I look back now at the way we could have made it even better. But I love Joshua because he's a man that has no fear of what God can do. And so we have this story where he is sent out by Moses along with Caleb and 10 other men. So there's 12 of them. They go to the promised land and they look and they see the giants and they see the challenges. They probably saw the Jordan River and they probably saw the armies of the other nations that were in the land. And they go back and all Joshua sees, he sees the prosperity. He sees the blessings of God. He sees the potential and the possibilities. And so him and Caleb are getting excited and they're chatting. They all go back to Moses and Caleb and Joshua are super excited. Like, Moses, the Lord has given us this land. We can take it. We know that he'll provide. And the 10 others go, there's no possible way. We're not ready. We don't have the resources. We don't have the finances. We don't have the capability. We have all of these restrictions, all of these barriers. We just can't do it. And so they don't do it. And they wander the desert for 40 years. Moses passes away and Joshua is commissioned as the leader and he calls out to God and God says, now is the time. The right man, the right purpose, the right moment has come for you to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. You are not a flashy leader, Joshua, but you're a faithful one. Now, he's leading a brand new generation, a generation that has only heard about the miracles of God, a generation that has only heard about the miracles of leaving Egypt and crossing the Red Sea. They've seen the miracle of manna and quail coming from heaven, but they have not seen God move in such a majestic way before. But Joshua has. And so right in front of them, they have their first major test of their faith, and the first major test of Joshua's leadership, crossing the Jordan River. The biggest barrier at the biggest flood time of the year. Not just a river, it's a barrier. What are some of the barriers maybe that we have, right? We might have some physical barriers, some physical limitations. We might have some emotional baggage. We have some things that we feel we got to just deal with, which is fine, but you don't have to wait to deal with those things to come to Jesus, by the way. Or maybe we have what I would probably say is the largest barrier of them all, the spiritual barrier. The fear of the unknown. I don't want to put my trust in God. I'm having a hard time trusting in something bigger than myself. We have this struggle of faith, and I would wager that's the barrier for most people. And I would also argue, not even argue, I don't have to argue with you. I will just tell you that I have seen and I have heard this very real struggle in an increasing level lately, where God has been tugging at the heartstrings of a number of people, and there's strong resistance because they don't want that element of faith. They want to be in control of their life. They want to be in control of their decisions and how they live their life. And there's this, I can see it. I can see the spiritual battle taking place between the thoughts and the minds. And they know that they have to do. They know that they have to take a step of faith, but they're not ready to yet. There's this resistance and there's this spiritual barrier that exists. And as God is doing some really cool things, there's even just a stronger voice of opposition that's speaking into their lives going, no, 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 no. And we're at the church cheering them on saying, yes, 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 yes. And so it's why we have this thing we call prayer. We just never stop praying. We never stop serving. We never stop giving. We never stop leading. We never stop meeting together. Because we know little by little, sometimes we're going to talk about the walls of Jericho next week, but brick by brick, we work on these barriers. And we continue to reach out, and we continue to minister, and we continue to care for and love as much as we possibly can. But the Jordan River for the Israelites in this moment was an impossible situation. I don't have any pictures of the Jordan River. You can probably Google it if you want, but if you've ever seen you've probably all seen the Agasabin River in the gorge when the dam is fully open and it's the spring and it's just flowing in a mighty way. Like if we didn't have the bridges there, that would be a hard river to walk across. It's one day I'd like to try. But anyways, right now you could walk, you could probably go down to the beach, and you could probably climb up the gorge and probably make it a good chunk of the way. You could surprise Judy and Tracy in their backyard as you come up and hit up Lakeview. And by the way, I didn't say anything last week, but I want to just welcome Shelby back home to Terrace Bay. I didn't want to embarrass her last week, but now she came 2 weeks in a row. So Shelby, we're so glad you're home. If you don't know, Shelby is the pride and joy because she's the baby. She's the most loved out of all of their kids in her eyes because she's the youngest. And so we're just thrilled to embarrass you this morning a little bit. Welcome you home. Glad you're part of the family. And I hope you know, whether I portray it or not, I hope you know you're always home when you're here with us. So thanks for coming and worshiping with our church. Yes, Mary, we hear you. I didn't say your name this morning. I know. I'm sorry. She's so good. Well, that just makes your heart smile, doesn't it? It's a good thing I have notes this morning. But here we are, harvest season, and it's at flood stage. And we have this raging, dangerous, impossible river by human mind to cross. It separated them from God's promises. It divided the wandering of their past and the freedom of their future. So here's the reality they face. We all know, and you probably can name a few things in your own life, some of the barriers or your own Jordan River experience. Some of the impossible situations that seem difficult to get through. Some of it's fear of change. Some of it's the habits that keep us stuck. For others, it's loss, grief, big one, disappointment that keeps us camped on the wrong side of the promise. But we all face these rivers of challenge at some point in our life. We all have these obstacles that we have to overcome. And so I don't want to share all of my stories with you because it's not about me today. But I'm thinking back to even just my days in high school and moments where I felt like I was standing alone in my faith. Yeah, we had youth group and we had things for you to be a part of, but I just knew that there was just something more that God was wanting to do. And I could just sense it, I could feel it, and I was living it out and walking it, but it just didn't seem like anybody else cared enough. And so there was kind of this crossroads moment, not so much maybe a river crossing, but where I had to, as Joshua says later on about you can choose any of these gods that you're going to serve, but for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And I remember as a young teenager having this sort of same thought, like you can go and do whatever you want to do, but I have to make the decision for me in the future of my life and what God has planned for my life, that no matter what, I am going to serve the Lord. And I tripped a few times. I'm not going to lie. I'll be honest with you. There's a few moments where I got distracted a number of times, but I'm thankful today for the grace and the mercy and the wisdom of God that He got me through and He set me back on the right track. Anyone else love when God sets you back on the right track? Anyone like when that happens before you trip and fall? That's the better time to get on the right track. But I'm here to tell you today that grace is enough that when you end up the wrong way and you fall off the horse, it's okay. There's some pain, there's some suffering involved, but God's grace is enough. God's love is enough for you to get back on the right track. We know that this barrier that they face, it's not just a physical barrier, but it's a test of their faith. It's a test of Joshua's leadership. It's not even a battle. It's a belief. They're in this moment of can God really do this? And Joshua says yes, and he's the leader, so we're going to follow him. But will Joshua rise to the occasion? Will he trust God enough to step into something that looks impossible? Will the people follow him when they look forward and they see the flooded river? So Joshua 3:3 says, when you see the ark of the covenant of your Lord, your God, move out from your position and follow it. Here's what we learn and know from this statement. What we know from this verse is we don't move forward until God says so. We don't move forward until God does. We don't step into the next season until God says, step into the next season. Don't move until I do, God says. When they see the ark, which represented the presence of God, go into the water, then the people of Israel knew if God is there, then I am there. If God is on the move, then I am on the move. If God pauses, I'm going to pause. If God waits, I'm going to wait. If He moves forward, I'm going to move forward. When I move, He says, don't stay where you are. Now, how did they break this barrier? Well, the first step of breaking this barrier, and it's probably on your handout. If it's not, you can fire ChatGPT later. But they want to know, how is this barrier broken? Well, they stepped into faith and obedience. The miracle didn't happen before the priest stepped in the water. It happened as they stepped out in faith. The moment their feet touched the flooded river, the water stopped. Faith doesn't wait for the water to part. Faith steps in and believes that God will make a way as you go. This is what I think about when we get to our budget season and planning financially for church. Like there's so many, like I don't know if you've watched the World Series. I think we're kind of over it, or we were healed a little bit from that loss as Blue Jay fans. But anyone notice how much that 50-50 was for the Blue Jays World Series? No, 24-3. I was like, maybe some people in the church will buy 50-50 tickets for the Blue Jays Foundation, and they'll tithe 10% of their winnings. Now, I am wise enough to know that God doesn't need the lottery for Him to fulfill His plans through our church. So thanks, Pastor Katie, for amen. Please follow her example of faith this morning, church. And no, we don't have to put our trust in the lottery for God to move in our lives, for God to do something great in our lives, and especially for him to do something great in his church. We don't need God to help us win the lottery. I hope you know that this morning. But we do have this moment where we put our faith in God, trusting God. You've given us a vision, you've given us plans, you've given us purposes, and we trust that you're going to resource that as we go. We don't have everything we need all at once, but God's going to give it to us as we go. It's surprising to me that this was such a step of faith for the Israelites. And why do I say that? Well, because they had just wandered the desert for 40 years. And every single morning, they would wake up and there would be manna on the ground for them to eat. And on Fridays, there'd be twice as much manna on the ground, so they didn't have to go on Saturday, the day of rest, the Sabbath. And then the next day, if they tried to save it, the manna they had would be no good. And so they already understood this concept that God is going to provide for us all of the needs that we have. They were already positioned in this moment of faith to understand how God works and what God is about to do. But faith doesn't wait for the waters to part either. Faith steps in and believes that God will make a way as you go. We often say, okay, God, we want a sign. We want you to do something great first, and then I will put my faith in you. Like, I want to see the Jays hit a home run before I start cheering for them again, right? I want to get over this loss and this disappointment. I got to see Bo Bichette hit another home run one more time before I can just not be heartbroken by them one more time. Now, I'm not heartbroken by them. Heartbreak is part of the game of baseball, as I have learned. So we're going to get out of baseball this morning and come back to church. But often, we want God to move first. And what God is saying, no, I want you to take your first step. I want you to take that first step. And as you take that first step, just watch me. Just watch me work. Watch and see, look and see what I am about to do. Number 2, how to break the barrier. Depend on God's power, not your own. The Israelites had no shot of getting across the river in their own strength, in their own power. I don't think they spent 40 years in the wilderness learning how to be engineers. They didn't go back to Egypt and go back to school to learn how to build bridges and rafts and boats and all of these things. They simply put their trust and their faith not in their own skill, not in their own ability, not in their own power. They put their faith and trust in God. Now, I've met most of you, or all of you, pretty well. Some of you are really skilled at some things. We're all skilled in different things. This is not a message on gifts, but we all have our own gifts, and we think, I can do that. Pastor Gary asked me to do this and do that. I can do that. Pastor Patrick. Wow. Patrick and I, and you're the pastor now, Patrick. That's great. We just gave you a new title this morning. But a week and a half ago, we were doing some work because we got this grant from the Ontario government for cameras and security system and doors and all that. So we've been working on putting it all together. And Patrick's really good at that. He can wire cables. He can help. He's got the right tools. We can get the job done, no problem. Now, Patrick, can you come up here and preach the rest of the message, please? He'd rather be in the attic again. But here's and the reason I throw Patrick on the spotlight this morning is that if the Holy Spirit had said to Patrick, go and do it, I know that he would. As much as he may not want to, as much as may not be his skill to stand up in front of everybody with the microphone and not let alone just pray, but to preach the rest of the message. I know if the Spirit asked him to, he would. Not that he would want to in the flesh. But we know he'd rather be in the attic above us working, not during church, of course. We'd all be very curious as to what's going on upstairs. There was no engineering plan, where there was no human ingenuity. It was all about divine intervention. The only way to get across was for God to do what God does. It was for God to move. And God was saying, you can't enter the promise by your power. You only enter it through mine. Now, this is a lesson that we talk about, in ministry and church all the time. When it comes to salvation, there's nothing that we can do to save ourselves from death. Absolutely nothing. The only step forward is to put our faith in Jesus, and that's what brings us our salvation. We can't pray more. We can't give more money. We can't show up at hot dog lunch every week and bring friends. We can't do all of these things to earn our salvation. We can't spend hours at the church helping Pastor Gary and Patrick in the attic and in the basement and in awkward places covered in insulation. We can't just do more of that and expect to have a full-on relationship with Jesus and see him in heaven one day. No, it's all done by God's power, by God's love, through his sacrifice of his son. It's all done through our faith because of the grace of God in our lives. We can't enter the next season that God has for us in our own strength and our own power. We have to do it by his. Number 3, the barrier was broken because they followed the presence of God. I mentioned it already, but the priests carried the ark, the symbol of God's presence. I hear all the pages flipping over. This is fantastic. You're following along. It's great. The priests carried the ark, the symbol of God's presence, and the symbol of the covenant of God. And the ark was the first thing that went into the river. This is the key. They didn't just rush ahead. They didn't say, we got this. They just followed the voice. They followed the leading and the presence of God. If the presence of God is not leading the way, don't move. Stay still. But I'm ready to go. Come on, let's go. Presence of God doesn't move, then stay still. You know, Psalm 46 does say, be still and know that I am God. Now, I'm excited. If you're passionate to just move forward and let's go, then I say, let's go. God's on the move. But there are moments where God pumps the brakes a little bit. He hits the pause button. And he says, and usually, what does that look like? That pause button usually means some sort of resistance, some sort of opposition, some sort of life crisis, an illness, something that just gets in the way of the momentum that's building. I don't want to use another World Series reference, but I'm just so in there. But there's momentum, right, that builds. Team wins a game, momentum. There's just that energy, the passion is there. And then something happens, there's an opposition. Player gets hurt. Star player gets hurt. Swings the bat funny and is out for 2 games. I've really got to stop the baseball. Oh, I will. Hockey is. Hockey's on. We can switch to hockey. I promise. Do it soon. I don't watch enough football to even. I can't speak on football enough. But we have these moments. There's opposition that comes, and sometimes it's we just got to persevere. We got to pray through. We got to just work harder and just keep our head down and hand to the plow and just keep going and just push through. But sometimes those are the moments that God uses. Hey, just slow down. Take a deep breath. I've got this. Be still and know that I am God. We don't have to be in a hurry. There may be an urgency on mission for sure. We can talk about that another day, but I believe Jesus is coming back soon, and there's an urgency to the mission. That there are people that are far from God that God so desperately wants to know and wants them to know him. There is an urgency to mission. I wish I could. I'm gonna listen to I'm gonna look up the quote again so I can say it right next week. But there's a search and rescue quote that I'm gonna butcher it, so I'm not even gonna say it. But it essentially is: the faster you go, the more mistakes you're gonna make. And so slow down and do it right, because right is efficient. I'll look it up. I'll say it again. But there's moments where God just says, slow down, stop. Breathe, take some deep breaths, take a pause, go for a walk, get a great place to go for a hike, go for a drive, sit in the silence of your basement, your bedroom, closet, spend some time in the presence of God and just pause. Don't move ahead, just trust that God says he's got it. They followed the presence of God. If the presence of God is not leading, don't move. When he goes before you, no barrier can stand against him. So slow down. Take your time. Write out the plans. Spend some time in his presence. Spend some time in prayer. Spend some time in his word. Read through Joshua again. And just say, okay, God, I see that you're on the move. I see that you're doing things. I can take a deep breath and know that, God, not only do you have this, but God, I'm going to wait for you. I'm going to wait on you. Because I also know that no barrier can stand against you. And so what do we do in the waiting? We pause, we pray, we praise, we worship, we read, we study, and we pause. I mentioned this already a little bit, but number 4, the ways to break the barrier is they moved in unity. It wasn't one priest stepping alone. It was all of them together carrying the Ark of the Covenant, stepping in the water together. They had to walk in unity. They had to lift the presence high, and they had to trust each other as the waters raged around them. You can just imagine, I just think it's flood season, so the banks are at their max. If it's not, it's already flooded, which means it's slippery and it's unstable. And if you get too close to the riverbank, you could slide right in. And that doesn't happen. But as they're not only doing that, they're going together and they're carrying this heavy object together, the Ark of the Covenant. But they have to trust each other as the waters rage around them. I believe that when God calls the church forward, he doesn't just call one person, he calls all of us together, because faith is not a solo sport. It's a team walk. I always think, when I think of a message on unity, I always think of the song from High School Musical, "We're All in This Together." And if anyone would like to sing that for us now, I would be okay with that. Because that's the reality of walking in faith together, is we are literally all in this together. And the beautiful thing of a team is that when one of us is successful, we're all successful. And we know that when one of us hurts, we all hurt and we all grieve. When one of us is thriving, we know that we all thrive. And so we continue to do this forward motion together, because he doesn't just call one person, he calls all of us. And if we head back to Pastor Jason's message from September the 5th, our 5th point and key to breaking the barrier is to always remember what God did. Never forget the promises and the fulfillment of those promises. Once they crossed over, Joshua said, 4 verse 6, "Take the 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan to serve as a sign among you." Memory matters. Memory truly does matter. They had all heard the stories from their parents and their grandparents. Hey, we were slaves in Egypt, and God sent plagues, and he sent signs, and he sent wonders, and there was great suffering, and we persevered, and we got through that together, and we were unsure, and we were doubting, but yet Moses helped build our faith. And then finally Pharaoh said, you can leave, and Moses would lead the charge with his sister Miriam leading the way, and they got to the edge of the Red Sea, and as they got to the edge, they heard Pharaoh's army coming after them, and God sent this mighty pillar of fire and blocked off Pharaoh's army. And then Moses stretched out his hands, and God opened the Red Sea, and all of the people crossed the Red Sea on dry land. And as the last person crossed, the fire tunnel went away, and the Pharaoh's army followed them and chased them into the Red Sea. And then as the last person walked out, God closed the Red Sea, and all of Pharaoh's army was drowned right there in front of them. And then they go through the whole stories. They say, we've heard all of these stories before. And so Joshua, from the command of God, says to the people, build a memorial so that you never forget what God did here in this place. He didn't do it the same way as he did back then. He did it new, because God does something new. He doesn't want to just do what he did yesterday. He's walking into something new. It's a new season. But build this altar so that your children, when they see it, they will ask, what do these stones mean? Why does this exist? It's so that we can remember the faithfulness of God, because there's going to be barriers down the road. You're going to get through this obstacle, and you're going to move along, and you're going to come across another obstacle. And you'll be able to look back and go, oh yeah, that's what God did. I remember, and if God got us through that time, he's certainly going to get us through the next. And he's going to get us into the one after that and the obstacle after that. Joshua says, you tell them, this is where God made a way when there was no way. If you can think back to your own life, in your own story, maybe the fact that you're sitting here or online in church this morning, think about how and why you're here. Think about the person that first invited you. Maybe you've been coming to church your whole life and you think about your parents or your grandparents that used to take you along to church. Maybe you came as an adult and you think of that friend that brought you here. You think of your first encounter with the presence of God. Remember those moments. Write them down. Don't forget the faithfulness of God. Think about the time that you prayed and God answered. Write it down, because the enemy is going to use your lack of memory against you. He's going to use that to instill some doubt. Well, God didn't really do that back then, you know. That really wasn't God. That was just a happenstance. That was just a coincidence. No, it wasn't. This was a real, true act of God. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be mighty. It doesn't have to be something outrageous. It might be, this person invited me to church and it changed my life. This person prayed with me in the middle of the street once and it changed my life. This person prayed for my family member in the hospital and they were better. Like, there's so many of us have our stories. Don't forget what God has done. Remember that God makes a way when there is no way. We remember not to stay in the past and think about the good old days, but we use it as a moment to help encourage and build our faith moving forward. And so here's some of the steps that Israel went through, that Joshua led them through, that I think will help us today. If you're standing at your own Jordan River and you can see the promises, but there's a flood river between you and it, here's some things that Joshua did with the people that I think will help us as we move forward in our faith journey as well. Joshua says, sanctify yourself. He told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things. Now, I'm not going to preach a whole message on consecration this morning, but essentially is this: give your life to Jesus. And say, God, my life no longer belongs to me, it belongs to you. And so everything that I say, everything that I do, everywhere I go, may it be pleasing in an order with the footsteps you've laid out for my life. God, the way that I talk, the way that I spend my time, the way that I spend my treasure, Lord, may it all be for your glory and not mine. Prepare your heart. Get right with God. Think of the prayer of David. I always quote the first part, search my heart and try me, O God. He also continues that prayer and says, look at all my fears and anxieties. Would you take them away? So sanctify yourself, prepare your heart to be right with God. Number 2, listen to God's word. Don't rush, don't run, don't retreat. Just pause and listen for what God is actually saying. Here we have Joshua. He's in his tent and he hears the voice of God speak and say, now is the time for you to rise up and go. Prepare the people, because tomorrow I am leading you into a new thing. Don't rush, don't run, don't retreat. Just listen for what God is saying. Number 3, remember what God has done. Look back and see. Maybe you can't think of a time when God did something in your life. Look back at a time and see what God did something else in somebody else's life. Think back and just see what God has done. If he parted the waters before, we can trust that God can do it again. Number 4 this morning, step into the water. At some point, obedience requires movement. Words do require action. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Anyone ever gone cliff jumping before? And it's like you're standing at the bottom and you go, oh yeah, I can do that. And then you get to the top and you go, I don't know if I can do that. But you remember because you've seen other people do it, so you know it can be done. Unless, of course, you're the daredevil and you're the first. But you see other people do the cliff jumping, but you stand there at the top and you go, that's a little higher than it looks like from the bottom. I wasn't quite ready or prepared for this. But we know that we have to remember, and I just lost my thought here, obedience requires movement. At some point, we can't just say we're going to jump in. We actually have to jump in. I love going to the pool with the family in the summers. It's one of the greatest blessings I think we have in our town. And I love the first time a kid gets on the diving board. And I always remember our own children, of course, doing. Now they're off the diving board before I'm even out of the car, it seems like some of the days. But I'll always remember the first time, they walk, not only do they just jump off the side of the pool, but they actually get to the diving board and they're moving towards the edge and like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they get there and they go, I don't want to do this anymore. And then they do it once and then they do it twice. And the third time they finally move forward to actually do it. Our obedience requires motion. Our obedience requires action. We can't just say it. We have to do it and live it. And some of us are really good with that. Some of us are just doers, like, yeah, I can do that. We just start, like, I don't have to figure it out. I can just start doing, and it will happen. Like, it'll just be the way it is. And others of you are planners. You got to analyze, you got to watch, and you got to have it all figured out yet. And yet sometimes God says, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to do. And for the rest of us, the people like me that are just doers and say, as we go, it'll happen, God says, no, pause and make a plan. Get together. But at some point, our obedience requires movement. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of touching the void. I think it was probably made into a movie. But there's a climber stranded in a deep crevice. Shattered leg, no way out. And he had a choice to either stay there and die or drop down, lower himself kind of in darkness further into the crevice and just hope that there might be a way out. And so he chooses, I say lower himself, if memory serves me correctly, it's actually cut the line and fall a safe enough distance and hope for the best. And so he does that, and he finds himself at the bottom now of this crevice, but as he gets there, he actually sees some light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not that tunnel, it's actual hope on the end of it. And he ends up being able to get out of the situation that he's in. I think for some of us, faith can feel like stepping into darkness. But I want you to know, even as it feels like you're stepping into darkness, you're not alone. Sometimes it feels like I just got to cut the cord and I just got to fall into this. I just got to go for it. I just got to take that step of faith and just trust God. Sometimes that's what faith feels like. And I believe when we take that step of faith, God meets us there. What feels like a barrier, all of a sudden, here's the cliche statement, what feels like a barrier, all of a sudden becomes a bridge. Now you'll remember it, right? That cheesy line that Pastor Gary said, the barrier becomes a bridge. Wow. And this is where you all go, wow. Now you'll remember the ridiculousness of your pastor. But God uses that bridge to bring you into the promise. So when God brings you through something, I would say this: don't forget the stones. Mark the moment, tell your story, pass it on to your kids, pass it on to others. Not only do you pass it on to others for them to remember, but it becomes a testimony and it becomes a moment of sharing and encouraging someone else to take their step of faith. Because what was once your barrier becomes your testimony. And what was once your fear becomes your faith. When you allow God to take you through the barrier becomes the blessing. So the barrier is the bridge, the barrier is the blessing. Fill in whatever blank you want. I think we get the point here this morning. I can keep talking if you want me to, but nod your heads if you know what I'm saying already. I think we're good. So this morning, before we go, I would love the opportunity to just pray, or actually have an opportunity there where you could just pray and say, God, would you give me the instructions that I need?